that they've been very familiar with over the course of the season. And taking a look at Feno's deck here, he is playing the Cycle Mage.
Yeah, and with Bunny Hopper, he opted to go with the one copy of his Halftime Scavenger in the main deck and have a side deck that was dedicated for both the mirror match of Cycle and Mage and for a potential Warrior matchup. Now, in Europe, provides you a bit more life and a bit more tempo.
Yeah, and Cycle, on the other hand, is playing that Burgle Rogue, tempo-oriented. And he does have a secondary deck that kind of finds that nice balance between the two. But yeah, time to get into it.
Yeah, game number one, a bit removal light for Seiko. It's pretty much limited to, Vendetta, I'd say, being the big one. That's going to make an impact. Is a lone copy of Sap in there as well. But that's what games 2 and 3 are all about, is Mage is weak to early pressure. And Ray of Frost is really one of the only ways they have to take care of stuff. And so what better minion to have that pressure going than Fairy Dragon in that instance?
Yep. All right, well, Seiko on the coin for game 1. Feno not, but I feel like Feno, out of any player in all regions of Grandmasters with Cycle Mage, is the player that can find the most creative lines. He can play the Cycle Mage in a lot of different ways. He can play for pressure. He's good at maximizing his minions on the board in the early game, which is not a skill that a lot of Cycle Mage players have. They tend to focus on, I need my Giant, and I need my Conjurer's Calling, and that's how I win every game. But that's not the case.
Every time I sit down and play Cyclone Mage, I put on a yellow bracelet that says WWFD, or what would Feno do? And every single turn I look at the bracelet and I picture what would Feno do in this situation. And the answer is usually play the minion so it's in play. It looks quite weird and almost too simplistic, but when he starts doing it, you get an idea of where his head's going, because at a certain point this deviates. And I haven't really pinpointed quite when. I think it's more of a feel thing for Feno, where he's getting an idea of what his opponent's hand is. An opponent had an awkward hand that tried to do something and it didn't do it as quite as efficiently as possible. But at some point down the way, that play changes. It goes from just play my biggest minion to set up a big turn that tries to start ending the game. And so in the meantime, though, Feno, he quite literally just plays minions on curve and starts trying to fight for it.
Yep. And it works out a lot. A lot of times you have to deviate, especially against Rogue, since Rogue is going to pressure you. Oftentimes you don't have the luxury of being able to just wait for Giant Conjurer's Calling, unless your early hand can fight for the board. But Seiko starting off with a couple of Blink Foxes, picks up Astral Rift and Bonfire Elemental. Not the best. Bonfire Elemental is just a 5/5 that you can play on the board. I don't think he has any elementals in his deck. He does not. So it's not like he's going to get the Battlecry effect off of that. Unless, I don't know, he picks up a Hench Clan Burglar and finds an elemental somewhere.
I could Shadow Step his Bonfire Elemental after the turn after he played it.
And then play it again and draw a card.
Yeah.
Found it.
Played itself as the precursor elemental. And so this is the turn I think that is really key for Feno, that he has Ziliax available right away. Is he offsets the pressure that Seiko has placed in trying to get going here, and then B, it moves him right into turns where he's starting to enter that dangerous Conjurer's Calling territory for Seiko, and that's the situation in game 1 he needs to be in. He has to get stuff in play, disrupt what's happening, and then follow up with a big play.
Yep. And the one benefit that the Ziliax does have, at least in this situation, is that it's also blocking the Blink Fox from being able to hit base and then bounce back. He can bounce it back right away with the Waggle Pick to essentially heal it and play it for 1 mana. He can try and play minions and maybe have a theoretically better target to bounce back, but having that guarantee gives you that peace of mind, and now you can play Spirit of the Shark alongside of it.
Yeah, I think that's a threatening enough turn for Feno, where he's got to now pay attention to what happens, and he wants to find a way to pressure check on the Spirit of the Shark, but at the same time, he doesn't have the mana to play a Giant and Conjurer's Calling. And so the turn for here in Feno's position gets quite tricky, where once again you look down at Seiko's position, he's managed to create pressure, he's managed to answer what Feno has going on. The difference is the Ziliax restored all the pressure that he put out, and so can the value he's generating be enough?
It's tough because at least Rogue nowadays, they do have lots of burst damage in the late game with Waggle Pick, Leroy, Shadow Step, but in order to get pressure going, it's pretty expensive. And they don't have any life gain, so they also have to be worried about the pressure that's, the counter pressure that's coming from the Mage's side.
Yeah, it's relegated to like literally a Ziliax and 2 Life Drinkers, which is technically more than the Mage has, but the Mage has freezes and Mirror Image.
Yeah.
Which, they're gonna duplicate that effect.
Yeah, the Life Drinker outside of Spear the Shark is not like a reliable way because it is expensive. It's expensive life gain. It's 4 mana for 3 health, and the body's not significant. Where it really gets its power is when you combine it with Spear the Shark, which he does have on board. It's not able to be dealt with, but Power of Creation, Luna's Pocket Galaxy picked up from.
Well, the Lunas was drawn.
Lunas was drawn. So
Yeah.
just Power of Creation with the 1 spell.
Yeah, that was a Cyclone for 1.
Sometimes it's about tempo. He doesn't want to get rid of these cards in his hand because they are valuable. Like Ray of Frost, you don't want to dump it just to get random spells from Mana Cyclone.
Yeah, it's serving such a powerful purpose here, right? I mean, he needed to threaten the shark. That's what the Mana Cyclone does. And, the spell is sort of like, sometimes you get something that's going to do something.
Power of Creation does something.
Sometimes, yeah.
Damage Stegatron.
Sometimes.
Sunwalker.
Sometimes.
Reckless Rocketeer.
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes. That was the Reckless Rocketeer saying sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a song that I was unaware of.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's an Eagles song.
I was about to say, I need to get myself all up on those fat beats.
That's a song, right?
It is. That was actually Reckless Rocketeer singing the song.
Oh, yeah. It's by the Eagles, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Blizzard picked up for Seiko here.
Ooh. That's pretty much an auto thief. He also has Shadow Flame, which is very interesting.
Well, he's also got 10 cards in hand. So we are not getting a fresh draw in Seiko's position next turn. And that is about the worst minion in the game.
Yeah. Does Fallen Aviana, I believe, which makes the first card player's play each turn cost 0.
Yeah, that's right. So your opponent gets the first effect.
Yes, because the first card you're playing is Dustfallen Aviana, and then they get the first effect.
Yeah. And so now I'm looking at the Shadow Flame. Shadow Flame spell damage works. Is that right? Like, if I recall correctly, if you Shadow Flame to Azure Drake, it would deal 5 damage.
I think so, unless they've changed it.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I'm recalling 2015 tooltips from video graphic or infographics I saw on Twitter.
Yeah.
Back in the day. It's been a long time since I've actually cast the card Shadow Step. But
it does.
Kirin Tor Tricaster is the reason I was looking at that. That offers with Shadow Step, if that's the way it actually works, a way to clear out boards right now. But the board, he does not have a lot of time to clear it out.
No.
Psycho spent his whole turn trying to generate some value and something to do. Fino instantaneously explodes on the board 15 attack. You have to do something now in Psycho's spot. This is why the removal comes in games 2 and game 3.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, where Rogue, as soon as they have a turn where they have to play for value and the mage takes advantage of it, everything that they want to do is way too expensive. A mage can play Mountain Giant plus Conjurer's Calling for 6 mana. They can also play for 5 mana. They can play for 4 mana sometimes with double elemental evocation. For 4 mana, you can play a Life Drinker.
And for 3 more, you could play an Evil Miscreant.
Which is a 1/4 and a 3/3 that dealt 3 damage to your opponent, healed you for 3. That's much worse, in my opinion,
Yeah.
than an 8/8 and a 7/8.
That's where Spirit of the Shark comes in. Now it's 6 damage and 6 health that you gave with that one.
Still doesn't help you fight back on the board.
Yeah, it's a little tough. You're still facing down Grave Harbor Mountain Giant,
Yeah.
and that's going to be more as well. There's a certain point where there's no more fighting against Mountain Giants. You actually just, you die.
You die. Once you reach that critical mass of Mountain Giants.
I am quite surprised that Fino chose to double trade in this instance. Like, the Henge Clan Burglar makes sense. I feel like the Shark is just not doing anything anymore, though.
Yeah, it feels like it might be too expensive for the Shark to be of impact, but
he does have another Conjurer's Calling in hand, so I guess that the damage he delivers to face actually doesn't necessarily mean anything, because the Conjurer's Callings will just represent lethal throughout the game.
also he just saw that Seiko picked up 2 lackeys. If they're Kobold lackeys, then you don't want to have a giant dealt with essentially for free.
You don't want to lose to a bunch of random 4 damage to face lackeys and Shadow Steps and stuff. There are still ways he could lose the game to randomly generated cards and lackeys, that's fine.
Yeah.
And so just make a bunch of giants, freeze the thing, and say, deal with it.
Also, Fino knows right now that Psycho's hand is 6 randomly generated cards and 2 lackeys. So he's basically playing around a maximum range of possibilities. Also, the 2 cards that Psycho's holding in his left that actually are rogue cards in his deck, he's been holding on to for a long time. Quartz Elemental.
Well, I'm looking specifically at the Shadow Flame with the Quartz Elemental. That's so likely to stay there, right? I honestly, I don't know the Tricaster Shadowflame interaction. Like, you mentioned it might have been changed, and now I'm second-guessing myself. So it's Blizzard this turn, and then next turn for 9 mana, you play Kirin Tor Tricaster and Shadowflame to clear out. Like, that's the game plan, right?
Yeah, it has to be. And honestly, it looks like a pretty solid game plan. I'm sure that it works that way. I'm trying to think back to my handlock days when, like, Blood Mage Down.
Yeah.
And you get the extra damage. You only don't get the extra damage from or from board clear effects like that when it's not.
Like Betrayal says the minion deals the damage. Shadowflame deals the damage equal to the minion's attack.
Yeah. Or like Blade Flurry, where it's like the weapon dealing the damage and not you. I don't know. There's some weird cases where it doesn't do damage, but in most use cases, it does. At least in the past, it has. It's just.
Either way,
I haven't seen a control Warlock in the metagame that's run Shadowflame in a long time. We had even Warlock, but that very rarely ran Shadowflame, and even when it did, it didn't run Spell Power.
I mean, even if it boils down to it, if he's uncertain that that's the case, you know, I'm not seeing, like...
He doesn't have an option.
It's like, well, I'm looking at, like, the Leroy Shadowflame, for instance. Like, all the minions for Fino are at 6 health right now.
Yeah.
And there's no way for him to fend this off. I'm pretty sure it does work with spell damage, the Shadowflame, but I'm not certain. Either way, that Shadowflame is a blowout right now.
Yeah. He could just do Leroy plus Shadowflame, and that works 100% of the time.
Yeah, why risk it, right?
I mean, the Quartz Elemental is doing nothing, whereas Leroy can potentially finish the game. So I think that if it in that case, if it does work...
Oh, this face... Yeah, that's actually a pretty mild reaction for what I expected from Fino in this spot, too.
It's the playoffs. You got to keep yourself calm and collected.
This is it. He's got to pop off.
Yep. Well, he could pop off. I mean, pretty much everything in his deck costs like less than 4 right now because all of his minions are 1 or 0.
Oh, my.
And Frost Nova.
2 Sorcerer's Apprentices to go with the Frost Nova now. So now pretty much everything in the deck does cost less than 4 mana. In fact, the only thing I'm thinking that would not at this point... No, everything does.
Everything costs 2 mana or less. Everything costs 1 mana or less with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. Because he's played Luna's Pocket Galaxy, all of his minions cost 1 or 0 in the case of the Giants. And he's got 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices on board. The highest spell he has is 3 mana.
So that Luna was just set up to actually be the complete pop-off, and that's it.
And he could still keep playing spells with Archmage Antonidas.
Yeah, that's really bad news for Seiko. And so I think what Fino's thinking of right now is, do I want to play Antonidas, or do I want to Conjurer's Calling away the Kaligos, the 4/12, and try to get bigger minions?
I think you just Archmage Antonidas. Rogue does not have board-wide clears, even if they get random generation. Vanish is rotated. He just played a Shadowflame. Even if he has a second Shadowflame, it's not enough.
Just keep going. Frostbolt the face, why not? That turn was insane, and so Fino prioritizing killing the lackeys so that way Ice Bear and Togwaggle shenanigans can't come into effect.
So Nathan, he had 10 mana and an empty board last turn.
And now he's got 1 mana floating and a full board and a full hand.
Yeah, and for the full hand are fireballs, and everything else costs very little mana. Seiko is quite dead.
No random way to get out of it with that one. That was the only thing he could look for. So even with the Shadowflame there, it's just Fino being able to have time to play the Luna's Pocket Galaxy discounted the deck so much that with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices, man, you could do whatever you wanted and picks up game 1.
Big win. A very big win for Fino. I think he is at a slight disadvantage.
That in his secondary and tertiary decks, he doesn't have a way that's dedicated to fight the Mage Mirror match. And oftentimes the slots in that deck are quite tight anyway, and there's not necessarily something you want to remove. It kind of depends on who you ask and what you're expecting. And so 2 copies of Halftime Scavenger go in, an Archmage Antonidas, and a Banana Buffoon come out of the deck. And so the Halftime Scavenger is meant to fight scavengers, but I don't want him immediately.
You can take a look at Seiko's deck here as well, taking out Evil Cable Rat, Snip Snap, Spear the Shark, Zilliax, and Sea Giant to make room for Betrayal, Eviscerate, Double Fairy Dragon, and Walk the Plank. So he's taking out a lot of the utility / value generation cards with like Evil Cable Rat, Spear of the Shark, which Spear of the Shark's great, but honestly, like we saw in the last game, when you have to just like play it early on in the game to get value, it gives the mage free turns that you can't afford. And he's added in Fairy Dragon. So good against mage. Can't ping it. You can't Ray of Frost it. It's just going to keep trucking you for 3. And just that removal stuff to kind of back up. Last game, he had to use Leroy plus Shadow Flame to clear a board full of giants. This game, he has Betrayal. So he can much more easily fight through big board states and have mana to do extra things like develop pressure. That's what you want to see if you're Seiko.
Generic value pressure.
Woo!
That's what Rogue is about in games 2 and 3 of this matchup. You play some minions, they play an important thing, you blow it up, and you keep attacking.
Yep.
The one cool deviation I think that Seiko has is that rather than bring 2 copies of Walk the Plank in the secondary, he's brought 1 Walk the Plank and 1 Eviscerate. So he's got a removal-like effect, but it can also serve the purpose of being damage if you're just winning by so much that you need to get something through.
Yep.
And I really like that choice from Seiko in this one. And for Fino, responding to the Fairy Dragon very aggressively, I think this is absolutely the right call, where Fino is desperately trying to contest his Fairy Dragon, and Seiko has a wonderful response by being able to kill it. You're not happy to use a Vendetta on it, but you are happy to protect a Fairy Dragon.
Yes.
And so for Fino now, the question is, do I want to be able to play Luna's Pocket Galaxy next turn, or do I need to battle for board? And I think that battle for board is something that he can pretty easily land on at this spot.
Yeah, Luna's Pocket Galaxy is kind of a luxury against Rogue. If you have the board and you have the time to be able to play it, then it's good.
He gets both of this situation, actually, where he's able to battle for board with the Cinderstorm. He picks off the Fairy Dragon, and now he can coin the Pocket Galaxy and possibly have 2 minions the turn afterwards with Halftime Scavenger plus a minion draw. This is really cool.
I mean, not the best Cinderstorm.
He could have killed both minions.
He could have killed both.
Not killing both made this interesting to me. Ziliak's drawn as well. Seiko's in trouble. He does not have much to go off right now. And that will help, though.
Oh, yeah. Draw 2 cards and play a beefed-up Edwin Van Cleef. It'll only gain... Okay. DVDing. It would have only gained +2/+2. Edwin Van Cleef with the Spirit of Shark compounds. So it would have been a 6/6 in that instance.
Wants more, and I don't blame him.
Yeah. I mean, next turn he could play 3 lackeys and then play the Edwin Van Cleef, but Ziliak is going to deal with this quite nicely. And this is honestly looking kind of similar to Fino's last game, where he just played a minion early to try and contest. Last game it was the Mana Cyclone, or sorry, the Banana Buffoon. This game it was the Mana Cyclone, trying to force resources out of Seiko and then stabilize to a point where he's got Luna's Pocket Galaxy rolling in. He'll be able to play anything that he draws.
So Seiko now able to fend off a big Giant's turn. The key for me is going to be Fino being able to fend off Giant turns in general. And when I don't say Giant, I don't mean like the cards Giants. I mean like a Stargazer Luna kind of turn. That's where I feel like Seiko is going to have the most trouble. Turncoat Contract, I believe, is the adjacent minions. Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that was very good.
That one is honestly the best in this matchup, with it an honorable award going to the one that gives a poisonous minion.
Yeah.
Because then you can answer the falling threat after as well.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, I said not necessarily Giant's turns. This one is a Giant's turn. But it's not a Conjurer's Calling one. And so your removal, like Betrayal, is only good if your opponent has multiple similarly sized things in play. The Turncoat Contract is pretty much always good, but you don't necessarily want to burn it. Fino going to spend max mana.
This will be 3 spells generated. Some very good ones. Fireball and Polymorph, I think, are too expensive to use in the matchup, but it will give him ways to deal with Edwin if this Giant gets dealt with.
Yeah,
but Arcane Intellect is the big one.
I'm looking at Fireball just being a way to finish the game. Like if you secure any amount of damage, really.
Okay. I mean, he cut Archmage Intonitis from the deck, so maybe that additional burn damage is going to be necessary. But
Another
I think
Frost Nova drawn as well.
Oh, jeez.
So all the Mana Cyclones are gone. So like the shenaniganry on random stuff is limited to Magic Trick now.
Speaking of, a pair of them.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious about this spot. You know, what's the best setup Fino actually gets? Because the question he's being asked right now is A, can you stop the pressure? Then B, once you stop the pressure, you have to deliver counter pressure because you're not ending the pressure on the opponent's side, you're just delaying it. So he's got to find a way to counter punch and to stop pressure at the same time.
Oh, wow. I was honestly thinking that polymorph onto the Edwin, take the 8 damage this turn, and then save the Frost Novas. Because every turn that you're...
Fino shakes his head.
Yeah, every turn that you're not using Frost Nova is like an extra turn that you'll have later on in the game where you could be taking more damage if you didn't have access to the Frost Nova. So when I'm playing this deck, especially against Rogue, any turn where I don't have to use Frost Nova, I try not to. Now that gets dangerous when you factor in like Waggle Pick and Leroy. But also clogging up your opponent's board with smaller minions makes it awkward for Rogue because they can't kill off their own stuff. And if they're like maximized on pressure, it can make some of their turns awkward.
Just like you.
And now Fino just kind of has to go for something big. Picks up Ice Barrier, which is a nice way to stall for time.
Research Project's good.
It's great, especially considering Seiko has 9 cards in
My
hand.
hand is too full.
Ray of Frost gets drawn. Fino, he might be having one of these. He might be having one of these big turns. It slows down right at that spot. He's going to Conjurer's Calling, and Betrayal is awaiting for Seiko right now. But his board's about to get frozen out, and so his turn is going to be limited to just spells and weapons. That's it.
Again, I kind of like the second Conjurer's Calling and a Ray of Frost here.
My hand is too full.
Shadow Step gets burned away too. That would have allowed Seiko to perhaps do something with this turn in minion development. But right now, he's got too many cards in hand to use Wondrous Wand.
Oh, wow. That's first world Hearthstone problems right there.
It's embarrassment of riches. You remember the old the Hand of Midas touch thing? The story where he touches everything, turns to gold, and then that ends up being a liability to him because he's just got too much gold.
Well, yeah, I could have told him that.
That's what I'm saying. I would be like, first of all, Midas, everything you touch, why not just like anything you want to turn into gold, you can turn into gold? Like, you really did think about that very well.
Yeah.
Seiko did think about this. So it's not like, you know, quite exactly like the Midas thing, but you get the idea. He's got too many cards.
Everybody knows to wish for more wishes.
Can't do that. Isn't that rule number 1 from the Genie?
I don't think it was a genie. I don't remember the story, but I think it was like a centaur or something.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Centaurs have different rules than genies. Everybody knows that.
Rub the magic saddle, and there's a centaur.
Yep.
And tank 7. Respect. The way that Fino wins is counterpunching. All you have to do is stop him from counterpunching.
Yeah, he knows that there's no Archmage Antonitis in the deck. Actually, he doesn't know.
You could assume.
You could assume, but
Yeah.
he hasn't seen a halftime scavenger yet. And nope, not yet. Doesn't know yet, but he will know. As soon as he plays his halftime scavenger, he'll know.
He knows.
Yes. In theory, he knows.
Yeah.
But the facts are, he doesn't know.
As long as it
Now he
keeps
knows.
out arrows.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. That halftime scavenger is going to have the biggest pop-off I have ever seen in my life. Seiko's just got 18 damage in this spot.
Whew.
And that's if the Waggle Pick returns nothing of value to your hand.
That's a lot. Is board space a limitation, though?
Well, he can walk the plank of minions.
He could. That's true.
Why didn't he attack with the sheep first? Like, 3 of these attacks didn't happen before he swung that Waggle Pick. Was there an outcome that gave him specifically lethal this turn was my thought.
Wait a second. He can trade in the 1/1s into this.
That's why he didn't. That's so smart.
And then he needs 10 damage. He does not have 10 damage, at least by my count.
But he's got a lot.
Yeah. He can deal 10 with the 2 SI7 agents.
Oh, that is so smart.
He does have a lethal possibility. Okay. Reckless Rocketeer.
When the whelps just become pure liability on your side, it is quite rare that I have seen that happen.
The future is ours.
All right, it's time to go.
He has no Frost Novas left in the deck, though. He's already played 3. He played the 2 from his deck plus a 1 randomly generated one, I believe.
Still Ray of Frost, right? There's still Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling stuff.
Yep.
There's a Ray of Frost up top.
Has the second half of the other one in his hand as well, but no Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Mirror image.
Tools of creation. Behold the tools.
Oh
Giant.
my, is it happening?
Behold the tools of creation.
So 5 mana left. He can play Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling. That would fill up his board and have mana for 2 Ray of Frost on.
So you got to think about where you want your Giants to flank.
Runs out on
I think in middle of Mirror Image.
Behold
Well,
the
I think that's how
tools
you
of
die. Is the
creation.
mirror images?
Yeah. The Mirror Images get picked off.
Behold the tools of creation.
And actually,
Look at this turn. This was nothing in play. This was a halftime scavenger. He's just fully protected now.
Conjurer's Calling just for a 50% chance to turn something into a taunt.
Well, he's got like a million more copies behind that.
He's just trying to protect his life total as aggressively as possible. He saw Leroy last turn, so he's saying, just don't get through this line of taunts. He even has an Ice Barrier.
I wonder.
Can he get through the Mountain Giant?
I don't see how Seiko can live. Like, he's going to live for a turn? Maybe?
Well, Fino's out of stuff. So if Seiko can kill that Mountain Giant, he knows that hand is Conjurer's Callings,
That's
a
a good
randomly
point.
generated spell, and 1 extra mage spell in hand. That's both Giants used,
That's a good point.
but I don't think he can get through it. That's the problem.
He doesn't have the mana, right?
Doesn't have the mana and the board space. Like, both limiting factors in the discussion. Testing for Splitting Image.
This guy's toast.
19 damage on the side of Fino. He's got 1 card left in his deck.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And this is going to draw it.
As long as it
He
keeps
needs to draw it.
Behold the tools of
It's Khadgar.
creation.
That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Because now he gets to trade off Luna. He gets to trade off Banana Buffoon. He gets to trade off Giant. He gets to play Khadgar and Conjurer's Calling as many times as he wants. And so the math here is, what can you die to?
Oh.
And how do you best play around that?
So he has 2 chances to go for taunts. But the amount of taunting is limited. All right, Grave Horse. More Grave Horse.
Playtime. Stop. Playtime.
Time runs out on me.
I want one more. Oh. Fino is effectively at 12 due to the fatigue damage he'll take next turn, but he's effectively at 20 due to the Ice Barrier he's got up.
More taunts.
And honestly, I think you might have been happier if those were 2 Giants, but either way, Seiko has to have a miracle happen this turn. Is Shadow Step perhaps that miracle? I'm thinking Betrayal and Betrayal alone can stop this.
Yeah. So he needs to Shadow Step the Heistbear and Togwaggle, dig for Wondrous Wand with a Lackey, find Betrayal, and then pick apart this board because Fino is out of things. Also, an Eviscerate still left in the deck, which can help clean things up.
Life Drinker gets found. Backstab. Can he kill enough?
I don't... He may be able to kill enough to survive from his perspective, but Vino has the Fireball as that last remaining randomly generated card. He can heal up with Life Drinker.
One giant gone. He has Witchy Lackey plus Goblin Lackey, so he can rush in a big minion when this is said and done as well, but I just don't think it's enough.
Needs a big 8-drop.
That's a big 8-drop. I just don't think it's enough. Ping 21 plus, yeah, Fino's got it.
That's enough. That means Fino going to take the series 2-0 over Seiko and move on to the semifinals on Sunday.
Able to get out of this one, and that's the benefit you get from being top seed in the group, is that you had 2 tries straight up.